The sprawling habitat dome of the Galactic Academy stretched 3 kilometers in every direction. It was a meticulously designed artificial jungle, designed to simulate one of the most dangerous environments in the Galaxia world, where only the fittest survived. The air buzzed with the sounds of exotic birds and insects, but there was an underlying tension in the atmosphere that could only be caused by the presence of predators inside. Instructor Tarek Van stood with his arms crossed, gazing through the observation window. His piercing eyes tracked the movements of the cadets who were preparing for their final examination, each one standing in front of an assortment of gear laid out on the table in front of them. The cadets, 20 in total, represented a diverse range of species from across the galaxy. Some were towering figures with armored exteriors, others were nimble and sleek, armed with natural weapons like claws or razor-sharp teeth. And then there was Daniel Brooks, a human, short by comparison, with no visible natural enhancements, standing among the cadets like a leaf in a storm. Humans had only recently joined the Galactic Academy, and to many, the idea that a human could be trained for combat was laughable. Daniel's classmates didn't see him as a worthy adversary. To them, humans were creatures to be protected, not trained for the rigors of combat. Yet, Daniel had been preparing himself for this moment for months. Today is your final test. Instructor Van's voice echoed through the briefing room. Each of you will enter the habitat alone and neutralize a Ravager beast. The creature must be captured or subdued, no killing. You have 6 hours. Fail, and you repeat the semester. Daniel watched his peers with a quiet resolve, adjusting the straps on his gear. Graf, a massive Turo warrior, cracked his knuckles with a boastful grin. "This will be nothing," he said, his voice like thunder. "We've hunted beasts far worse than this." Quicklaw, a Solvoni with elongated forearms tipped with deadly blades, smiled. "Speed and precision are all that's needed. The beast won't even see me coming," while the others bristled with confidence. Daniel remained focused, his eyes scanning the environment, analyzing. He was methodical, careful with each piece of equipment he checked. He knew this test wasn't about raw power or speed. It was about survival, understanding the situation, and adapting. Instructor Van's voice once again filled the room. The Ravager is a bioengineered predator used across the galaxy for security purposes and high-risk hunts. It has enhanced senses, natural weapons, and intelligence. The longer it is exposed to your presence, the more dangerous it becomes. The creature is territorial and will set traps to catch you off guard. The room fell silent as the students absorbed the gravity of the challenge. Daniel could hear the faint whispers of doubt as the others eyed him, questioning his chances of success. "Choose your order wisely," Van added. Graf was the first to volunteer. His confident stride carried him into the jungle-like habitat, a predator among predators. The rest of the cadets watched intently, and an hour later, Graf limped back through the entrance, his body covered in deep claw marks, his pride shattered. He had underestimated the Ravager. It had used the terrain to its advantage, evading his brute strength and leaving him helpless. Next, Quicklaw entered. Her speed was her greatest asset, but even she was no match for the Ravager's adaptability. She returned hours later, bleeding from multiple lacerations, unable to even approach the creature. One by one, the other cadets failed, each one of them overpowered by the Ravager's cunning. The air in the observation room grew thick with tension and disbelief. The creature had learned from every encounter, growing more aggressive with each failed attempt. Daniel sat at the back of the room, observing each failed attempt with keen interest. While the others expressed frustration, Daniel made notes in a small, waterproof notebook, his observations not just on the creature, but on his peers. He studied the patterns, how the Ravager responded to the different approaches. It's defending its territory. Daniel muttered to himself, more as a realization than an assertion. Bren, the Academy's head instructor, turned toward him. Explain, Cadet Brooks. Daniel stood and walked to the front, his gaze calm yet intense. The Ravager isn't attacking because it's hunting us. It's defending its home. That's why it's becoming more aggressive with every encounter. We're intruding on its territory. It's scared, not hungry. The room fell silent. Sharp Sense, a Dref with exceptional hearing, scoffed. The human thinks the creature has feelings. How quaint. But Instructor Van was intrigued. What are you suggesting, Cadet Brooks? Daniel glanced at the gear laid out on the table, then turned to face the observation window. We need to approach this differently. If it's territorial, an aggressive stance will only reinforce its fear. I need to show it that I'm not a threat. I'll go last. Bren nodded slowly. Very well. Proceed when you're ready. The cadets watched, some with skepticism, others with curiosity, as Daniel gathered his gear. But instead of grabbing his stunner rifle or adjusting his armor, he did something unexpected. He removed the chest armor plates from his protective gear, setting them aside. You're weakening yourself, Graf growled from across the room. Maybe, Daniel replied quietly, but I won't need it if this works. Van, hesitant but allowing, gestured for Daniel to proceed. As the habitat doors opened, Daniel stepped into the jungle. The artificial trees and thick undergrowth surrounded him, but he didn't rush forward like the others had. Instead, he knelt down and pressed his hand into the soil, feeling the texture and moisture, connecting to the environment around him. Then, he did something that baffled everyone. He pulled a small container from his pack, filled with dirt and plant matter he had collected from the Academy grounds during his free time. Slowly, he rubbed it over his arms, neck, and clothing, masking his scent, just as Earth hunters did when tracking dangerous animals. What's he doing? Graf muttered in confusion. Some kind of ritual. No, Van said softly. He's hunting. Daniel moved slowly through the jungle, his every step measured. He avoided the trails that had been trampled by the other cadets, instead threading his way through the thick vegetation, moving quietly. The other cadets watched the monitors in disbelief. After 20 minutes, Daniel had only moved 50 meters, yet he had shown no signs of urgency. Unlike the others, who had charged through the jungle to confront the creature, Daniel understood that rushing was a mistake. He stopped every few steps to listen, to observe. The jungle was alive with sounds, bird calls, insects buzzing, but Daniel wasn't listening to those. He was listening for the silence, the absence of noise, the space where the other animals had gone quiet. That's where the predator moved. He veered left, moving away from the silence, tracking the edges of the Ravager's territory. The others watched, confused. Why was he moving away from the predator instead of toward it? Daniel's eyes flicked to a tree, noticing a series of fresh claw marks, the deep, jagged cuts still oozing sap. He knelt and examined the markings closely. "It's injured," he muttered under his breath. The Ravager's not just defending its home. It's wounded. Daniel didn't waste time with weapons. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small medical kit and some emergency rations. He scattered the food in small portions, leaving them behind like offerings. Understanding that the Ravager wouldn't see him as a threat if he didn't force the situation. Hours passed. The cadets in the observation room grew restless, frustrated with the lack of action. But Daniel was patient. He wasn't hunting the creature. He was communicating with it. The Ravager's den came into view, a natural depression beneath a massive root system. Daniel crouched at the edge, smelling the familiar musk of the creature. He didn't approach it directly. Instead, he positioned himself at a distance visible, but non-threatening, and waited. His patience was rewarded when, after several hours, a set of glowing eyes appeared from the den, studying him from the shadows. Daniel didn't react, didn't move, didn't stare. He simply sat and waited. Slowly, the Ravager emerged, limping toward the food. It sniffed the rations and, without hesitation, devoured them. The creature didn't flee. It didn't attack. It simply consumed the food. Then, it returned to the den. Daniel repeated the process, offering more food, maintaining the same calm, non-threatening stance. Each time, the Ravager grew a little bolder, a little less aggressive. When the creature came out the fourth time, it didn't retreat. It sat, watching Daniel. Daniel spoke softly, offering words of comfort. "I understand," he said. "You've been hurt, and no one's asked if you're okay." He held up his medical scanner, demonstrating its harmless nature by scanning his own hand first. The Ravager hesitated, then took a step forward. It sniffed the scanner, its massive body tense but not aggressive. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, but he stayed calm, talking softly to the creature. "I can help," he said, "but only if you trust me." The Ravager's head tilted, and for the first time, it didn't look like a predator ready to strike. It was studying him, processing his presence, not as prey, but as something else entirely. Slowly, the creature offered its injured paw to Daniel, allowing him to treat it. Daniel applied the antiseptic, careful and steady. The creature growled low, but it didn't attack. Daniel applied the bandage and waited for the Ravager to move its paw, testing the healing process. When it did, it didn't limp. Daniel smiled gently. "There you go," he said, feeling a sense of victory that wasn't about strength or combat. "What about understanding? Double quotes now. Let's get you to the extraction point," he said, offering the creature a calm invitation to follow. To everyone's shock, the Ravager did just that, trailing behind him like a loyal animal. When Daniel emerged from the jungle, the cadets and instructors were speechless. The Ravager followed him calmly, no longer the fierce beast it had been when the exam began. It had been neutralized not by force, but by trust, patience, and empathy.